Okay, now this is the second part of the lecture number 3, and in this part of the lecture for week 3 we are going to talk about cells. So in this lecture we are going to take the tour of the cell. We are going to see the different organelles inside the cell, and we will also talk about the functions these organelles perform, and also we'll talk about why do the cells divide and how do they divide. Okay, so that's what we are going to cover. So let me go to the slideshow mode. Okay, so this is chapter number 20 from the book. So first of all, before we start talking about the cells, let's talk about what is life and what are the characteristics possessed by the living organisms. So all the living organisms basically need energy, because without energy we cannot survive. So all living organisms need to assimilate energy, and all living organisms, they grow and develop, and all the living organisms, they respond to the stimuli. And most important characteristic of the living organisms is they are made of cells. Okay, if you see the whole biological world around you, okay, it's very, very complex. There will be around like 100 million species in this biological world, and there's a range of the living organisms, starting from the most simple form of life, bacteria, which is just one single cell, moving towards the most complex form of life, which is the human beings. We are made of like trillions of cells. So basically the bacteria is just one single cell, and there is everything inside the cell which gives life to that bacteria. And going towards like going moving towards the most complex form of life, which is human beings, we are made of trillions of cells. Okay, so in us, our cells, they make tissues, then tissues makes organs, organs makes organ systems, and then the different organ systems make the organism. That's what we are. So we are made of cells. Okay, so if you see the whole biological world, which is very complex, all the living organisms are made of cells. They can be unicellular, which means made of only one cell, or they can be multicellular. So let's talk about the important people in this field, and let's see what are their contributions. So Leeuwenhoek was a scientist who actually discovered the microscopes. So he was the one who used the system of lenses, and with the system of these lenses he was magnifying small things. So he was the one who discovered the microscope. So Anton van Leeuwenhoek was the scientist who was responsible for finding the microscopes, and he watched the cells under the microscope. Robert Hooke was the scientist who gave the term cell. Okay, so so these are the two important scientists involved in this field. So so basically, if we talk about, if we see the structure of the cell, so basically inside the cell you will see the largest organelle. So whenever I say organelle, organelle means the compartment. So the largest organelle will be the nucleus, and nucleus is considered the control center of the cell. Why it's considered the control center? Because inside the nucleus is DNA, and DNA is a chemical which is responsible for hereditary. Basically, parents pass the characteristics to their next generation, or parents pass the characteristics to their offsprings through the genes. And what are these genes made of? These genes are made of a chemical called DNA. It's called deoxyribonucleic acid. So we will talk about DNA also in detail. We will have one complete session on DNA technology, and you will see that how fascinating it is, how fascinating is this field, and we have really done wonders in this field. And because of that, different avenues have been opened, but they have some drawbacks too. We'll talk about all those things, but for today, when we are talking about the cell, so you should know that the largest organelle in any cell is the nucleus. Inside the nucleus is DNA, and the region which is between the nucleus and the plasma membrane, which is the membrane which surrounds the cell, that region is called the cytoplasm. So if you see all the biological world, basically there are two kinds of cells. They are called prokaryotic cells and the eukaryotic cells. Now let's see what does these names mean. Prokaryotic. So first of all, what does the word karyotic means? Karyota word means the nucleus, and eukaryotic. Karyotic word means nucleus. Eu means true. So we have two kinds of cells, eukaryotic and prokaryotic. Eukaryotic cells are those cells which have a true nucleus, and prokaryotic cells are those cells, pro means before, means they don't have a true nucleus, or they are before nucleus. So we have, in this whole biological world, there are two kinds of cells. They are called prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells are the ones which have true nucleus, and prokaryotic cells are the cells which don't have the true nucleus, or actually they don't have the nucleus. I will be talking to you about. So the example of prokaryotic cell is the bacteria, and the example of eukaryotic cell is algae, fungus, protozoa, plants, animals. Okay, but all these cells, whether they are prokaryotic or eukaryotic, they all have cell membrane, they have cytoplasm, they have genetic material, they have energy transfer molecules, they have enzymes and coenzymes. So cell membrane. So cell membrane is basically the membrane which separates a cell from its surrounding. So cell membrane is a membrane which encloses the cell. Okay, so the membrane will be somewhere here. Like this is the plant cell, this is the animal cell. So it's the plasma membrane is a membrane which encloses the cell, and it separates the cell from the surrounding. And this plasma membrane is very important, because if this is your animal cell, things have to come inside the cells, and a lot of things they have to move out of the cell. Everything, this transport takes place across this plasma membrane. So it's a boundary, okay, which separates the cell from its surrounding. What is cytoplasm? So if this is the nucleus in the cell, this region between the nucleus and the plasma membrane, this region is called the cytoplasm, and the genetic material is inside the nucleus. And let's talk in detail about the prokaryotic cell. So the example of prokaryotic cell is bacteria and archaea. Archaea also, so both of them are unicellular, which means they are made of only one single cell. So bacteria are the ones which in a layman's language we call bugs, which infect us, right? Which give us infections and make us sick. But there are some good bacteria too. So bacteria are good and bad. So there are a lot of good bacteria. The bacteria which is present in the yogurt, the bacteria present in the cheese, there are a lot of bacteria present which are on our skin, a lot of bacteria in our gut. They are all good bacteria. Okay, so bacteria can be good as well as bad. So archaea, what is archaea? Archaea very similar to bacteria, but they have some differences. So that is why they have been classified separately. They are also unicellular, and both these bacteria and archaea, they are prokaryotic cells. So prokaryotic cells does not contain traditional nucleus, mitochondria, chloroplast, Golgi apparatus, and ER network. So we'll be talking about all these organelles very shortly. So just to understand at this point what a prokaryotic cell is, so the most important thing in a prokaryotic cell is it does not have a nucleus. So nucleus is the organelle in which the DNA is there. Now bacteria is a life form, which means that it should have DNA, it should have genetic material, because for any organism to be living, it has to pass its characteristics to the next generation. And how it's going to do that? It's going to do that through the DNA. So this is the very, very important characteristic of a living organism. So there are basic three characteristics for living organisms. Number one, they should possess the genetic material, they should have the plasma membrane, and third, they should have the ability to assimilate energy. if any of this characteristic is not there, then it is not living. Okay, so bacteria and archaea, these are prokaryotic cells, these organisms, they don't have the true nucleus, but they do have DNA, because that is the characteristic of the living organism. So a prokaryotic cell basically is a simple cell which does not have compartments. So to understand here at this point what is a prokaryotic cell and what is a eukaryotic cell, I will give you an example in a layman's language. Like prokaryotic cell, you can consider like if you go out for a camping. At night, what you're going to do, you're going to like open a tent and you're going to spend your night in that tent. So now the tent is basically like one room, right? So what you're going to do in that tent, like you can decide like, okay, in this corner I'm going to do my cooking. If you have children with you, you can say, okay, this corner we can make for the playing of children, this corner like we can do this activity. So basically if you have one single room, okay, like if you're just living in one single room, you can make different corners for different activities. So it means that in a single room you don't have the compartments. So the prokaryotic cell is very similar to this one single room. So in one single room, you don't have separate compartments, but you have different corners where you can do different functions. So a prokaryotic cell is like a single room in which there are no separate compartments for different functions. So which means that the prokaryotic cell, it does not have a special organelle or a special compartment to store DNA. Okay, so the DNA is there, but it does not have a nucleus. So the different functions in a prokaryotic cell are performed in the same place. It's like a single room. So this is the structure of a prokaryotic cell. But on the other hand, a eukaryotic cell is like, you can consider like your complete house. In your house, you have different rooms for different activities. You have kitchen to do cooking. You have an office where you do your work. You have sunroom. You have living room. You have bedrooms. I mean, for different functions, you have different compartments or different rooms. So similarly, a eukaryotic cell is like a house, in which, like in a house, you have different rooms for doing different activities. Similarly, in a eukaryotic cell, there are different compartments for different activities, and those compartments are called organelles. So nucleus is one of the organelle, and nucleus is the largest organelle, and it is called the control center because the DNA is there. So DNA has the whole information. So DNA is the database. Okay, so this is the main difference between a prokaryotic cell and a eukaryotic cell. So let's see the structure of a prokaryotic cell. So this is a bacterial cell, which is a prokaryotic cell. You can see here, this is the DNA. It's not in a separate room. It's not in a separate compartment. There is no special organelle called nucleus in the prokaryotic cell, but the DNA is just there. Okay, and these are the different granules present which are doing different functions. And this is the cell membrane, and outside the cell membrane there is a cell wall in the bacterial cells, and outside the cell wall the bacteria has a capsule which basically gives protection to the bacteria. And this is the flagellum in the bacteria, and these short appendages, these are called fimbriae in bacteria, and this fimbriae basically helps in the attachment of bacteria to the cells. Like when some bugs infect your respiratory tract, first of all they need to get attached to your respiratory cells, and how do the bacteria is going to do? It's going to do through these fimbriae. Okay, so this is what these fimbriae are for. So this is the basic structure of bacteria. So inside the bacterial cell there is a DNA. There's no special compartment, it's just like there, and there's some other granules here which are doing different functions. There'll be ribosomes. Ribosomes are like protein factories. Then this is the membrane. Outside the membrane, this is a plasma membrane. Outside the membrane is the cell wall, and outside the cell wall there is a capsule in the bacteria, and this is flagellum, and these are the fimbriae. These short appendages, they help in the attachment. So this is the structure of a prokaryotic cell, and bacteria and archaea are two prokaryotic organisms. Okay, now moving to the eukaryotic cells. So we have a great diversity with the eukaryotic cells. So we belong to the kingdom Animalia. Okay, so we are animals basically. We belong to the kingdom Animalia, and our cells are eukaryotic cells. So eukaryotic cells, what are eukaryotic cells? So as I just said, to understand eukaryotic cell in layman's language, you can understand it like a complete house where you have different rooms for doing different activities. So similarly, a eukaryotic cell has separate compartments, separate rooms, separate organelles for doing different functions. That is what a eukaryotic cell is. So the eukaryotic cells, so basically we have three domains. So the whole biological world can be divided into three domains, and it is the broadest classification. It includes bacteria, archaea, and eukaryota. Bacteria and archaea, these are prokaryotic cells, and the domain eukaryota has four kingdoms: kingdom protista, kingdom fungus, kingdom plantae, and kingdom animalia. So we belong to this kingdom. So in the kingdom protista, we have diverse organisms like your amoeba, paramecium, some algae. In the kingdom fungi, we have different kinds of fungus. Then in the plants, all the plants are there, and in animals, so all the animals are there, and human beings are also animals. So these are all eukaryotic cells, which means they all have true nucleus, and we are now going to study a eukaryotic cell in details, and we are going to take the tour of the cell. We're going to study all the different organelles. So this is a plant cell. Okay, so first of all, let's study the membranous structures. Okay, so the very first membranous structure is the plasma membrane. So it is the membrane which surrounds the cell. Okay, it separates the cell from its surrounding, and through this membrane the transport of things takes place. So a lot of gases are going to come inside, like oxygen. Your cells need oxygen, so oxygen is going to come inside the cell. Carbon dioxide, it's a byproduct, it has to go out. How this transport takes place? Through the membrane, through the plasma membrane. Then this is the nucleus, and this is the largest organelle, and inside the nucleus is the DNA. So this nucleus is also covered by a membrane, and that membrane is called the nuclear membrane. It's called the nuclear membrane. There is basically inside our cells there is a system of membranes, and it's called the endomembrane system. Okay, so this is the plasma membrane which is surrounding the cell. Then there is a membrane which is surrounding the nucleus. This membrane, this nuclear membrane, so this is the nucleus, and it is covered by this membrane. You can see here, this is the membrane, this is the nuclear membrane. So this nuclear membrane actually extends into the cytoplasm. It extends into the cytoplasm, and that is called endoplasmic reticulum. And another we have some more membranes in the cytoplasm. They make the Golgi apparatus. So this Golgi apparatus is basically, it's kind of it's made of the membranous sac kind of structures, and from these Golgi apparatus some lysosomes are formed. Okay, so these are basically like membranous vesicles, and they have some enzymes in them, and they can basically hydrolyze a lot of macromolecules or any worn out organelles inside the cell. So basically what does endoplasmic, so this is all endomembrane system in the cell. So your nuclear membrane, endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, and lysosomes, these are all made of membranes. Now let's understand the so nuclear membrane, it encloses the nucleus, it surrounds the nucleus. Endoplasmic reticulum, endoplasmic reticulum is the plasmic membrane. Now this